to the subject of the day, superstar Billy Clifford. A lot of people have helped on this program, so we want to acknowledge them. Ray Brandstetter, who's here. Ward Luce, of course, did a lot of work helping me on this, researching it and that sort of thing. Mary Mott, who lives it in the Clifford house, and she's here with her entire very supportive entourage, and we appreciate that. Marty Rich and my very courageous wife, Cheryl Walter, for coming today. Thank you. Also like to thank those who've helped promote it. Brenda Burns, of course, Vincent Sandy Gonzalez, and Stacy Weller from the Gloria Theater, who helped with promoting this event, so we really appreciate that. But most importantly, I've used as a guideline for this program a history written by Sherry Verts, and sadly she's no longer with us, so I want to dedicate this program to her. But even though she's not here, her husband, Dick Verts, is here. So Dick has been around here for, I'd say, 30-some years, volunteering for this organization. He's done everything and anything for this organization. So I would like to give Sherry and Dick some applause. Okay, so here we go. Get my clicker up here. These are pictures of Billy at various stages of his life. Of course, that's when he was older. This is when he was younger, former portraits. There are a lot of pictures of Billy Clifford because he was a promoter. He promoted himself. It's common now when you first go to Los Angeles, and I've been through this experience, first thing you do is get a headshot somewhere, and then you pass them, you drop them out of airplanes. Billy Clifford was doing that in 1890. So there are a lot of pictures of him in different formats and disguises. This is, of course, Mary Mott's house where Billy Clifford lived at 114 West Water. The house is still there. There's a historical marker there, of course. William Clifford Shirey, better known as Billy Clifford, was born to Levi White Shirey and Sarah Elizabeth Gladden Shirey, January 24th, 1869, in this home. We believe this to be a photo of Levi and Sarah in front of the Water Street property. At that time, it doesn't really show in this photograph very well, but water was running right down Water Street. I mean, it didn't run under Water Street, it ran on Water Street. And that kind of shows up in one version of that picture. Levi came to Urbana as a child, became a police officer, and later Urbana's chief of police. He purchased the house, which is not too far from the city jail, from William Patrick about 1856. This is William Patrick. Judge Patrick was well known. Patrick Avenue, of course, is named after him. He put all the willows along, that was called Willow Drive, going to the Oakdale Cemetery. Judge Patrick did that. He did a lot of things around here. He came to Urbana as a child in 1811. Let me go back for a minute. The property, this house, was probably originally owned and possibly occupied by Colonel William Ward, the founder of Urbana. He owned and platted the city to begin with. But back to William Patrick, he came to Urbana as a child in 1811, wrote many pieces of historical recollections included in Judge Evan P. Middleton's Champaign County History. He became a judge and eventually mayor of Urbana, and he helped with the establishment of Oakdale and lined the street leading to it, now called Patrick Avenue, with willow trees. As a child, young William Shirey went by the name Cliff Shirey. As a teen, he attended the Old South Elementary School, which then was located at South Walnut and College. I'm not sure which corner. Then he attended Urbana High School for a while. During his early teen years, he worked as a bellhop at what some called Weaver's Hotel. According to Barbara Sauer, he worked there for $1.50 a week. Henry Weaver purchased a two-story building from a man named Pearson and proceeded to add 3 more stories to it, so that it appeared as what we know as the Douglas Hotel today. He operated a hotel known as the Weaver House there, which was rebuilt by his son Lemuel in 1870, and this is probably where young Cliff worked, as it would have been a short walk for him. In further support, our museum has a letter written to Henry Weaver's son Lemuel about the new Souls Hotel, built in 1889, cutting into the business of the Weaver Hotel. It became the Douglas Inn Hotel in 1901. This photo of the Douglas dates to sometime between 1905 and 1914, when the arches still stood there on the square. Billy Clifford's father, Levi, a strong abolitionist and supporter of Abraham Lincoln, played in Porter's band, organized in the summer of 1859 for the purpose of taking part in the presidential campaign of 1860. He taught young Cliff to play the drums, at which point he took to putting on shows in an old barn located behind the house where the Gloria Theater, formerly the Clifford, now stands. Some say in the summers he played with circuses passing through the area as early as age 10. At the age of 13, in the summer of 1882, he made his first appearance with High Henry's Minstrels as a black drummer boy. And here we need to point out that minstrel shows were the primary form of traveling road shows of that day. Of course, today we would view such spectacles as well beyond politically incorrect. They're racially abhorrent and unacceptable. So prepare yourselves for some unseemly photos along those lines. There was a minstrel show performed right here in Urbana as recently as 1950. That was at South Elementary. Moreover, minstrel shows often traveled with or were part of circuses, and the circuses themselves were not altogether wholesome entertainment, as they usually featured side shows displaying dancing girls with little or no clothing and so-called freak shows performed by disfigured people with special talents. No doubt there was animal abuse, so circuses, that's the way they were then. Back to young Cliff, who then went about promoting himself by posing for photographs as an entertainer. Here he poses with Frances Hicks, known as Fanny, on the left there. There's Fanny, who, as far as we can tell, was not related. Next, he posed using the name Will Clifford. And the summer after that, he went on the road as one of the song and dance boys with Barlow Wilson Company Minstrels. Featured, that's Barlow Wilson and Company. And here's another shot of the Barlow Wilson crowd. Billy may be in there somewhere, I'm not sure. That was soon followed by a short gig he did with Robinson Circus. That was a little different looking outfit. Finally, at age 16, he decided to leave home and join the Mills Orton Circus full time. By now he was Billy Clifford, an up-and-comer who played the snare drum, sold tickets, developed his own song and dance routines. On the side, but still with Orton, Billy and George Marsh, known as Moats, also from Urbana, created a very popular drumming, singing, dancing routine that was quite a hit. George Marsh later became the principal clown in the Ringling Brothers Circus, but he was killed in a railroad accident in 1916. So Billy may well be in here somewhere. I don't know, maybe there. Of course, they're all numbered, but there's nothing on the back of the photo. Which reminds me, If you have photos, it only takes a generation or two and people forget who they are. Please write something. We have a pretty good collection in the museum here of photos with nothing on the back. And what do you do with them? Okay. After 3 years with Orton and a very brief stint with a partner named Patterson, which, well, I'm not sure even which one he is. But that's Clifford and Patterson is the way they're promoted, so I guess that'd be Patterson on the right. He was offered an opportunity to launch a new routine with George Fuller Golden, one of America's foremost monologue artists of the day. Prior to Billy's partnership, Golden would deliver a solo stand-up monologue with an imaginary character named Casey. He would stand on the stage and communicate with this guy. It reminds me a little of Shelley Berman's routines, if people remember him on the old Ed Sullivan Show. Clifford and Golden played in first-rate vaudeville houses all over the United States that featured not only top-level entertainment, and we'll talk more about the vaudeville scene in a little bit, featured only top-level entertainment, I should say. Their routine was simple but skillfully and artistically staged and acted. Their song and dance skit and old-fashioned Irish clog routine never failed to win hearty applause, as both were gifted comedians. For several more years, Billy and Golden traveled the country, but then the two parted amicably and decided to go different ways. Big-time circus and minstrel impresario Al G. Fields lured Billy to his touring company. That's Al Fields in the middle. He was big time when it came to promoting and minstrel shows. The name Billy S. Clifford is clearly listed on the bottom of these photos. I say borrowed from an unnamed museum. It's interesting. I found these on the internet, and I went back a few minutes later after I pulled them off, and that site went away. So, and it's never come back since. So I don't know. I have a sneaky suspicion it could have been Huntington Museum in California, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they were there long enough for me to get them. So that's why they still say Property Museum on them. I didn't have a chance to ask anybody about it. We think he also appears on several of these posters, although the performer next to Field in the poster on the right is listed as Billy Clark. That's that one. He sure looks a lot like Clifford, I think, right there. And there's, of course, Al Fields there. And then here, you'd see they'd be in blackface, but then they would have their actual pictures above them. That's the way they did it in those days. It was during this season of his career that he won a medal as a champion drummer and was recognized as the best snare drummer in the land. One promoter went so far as to bill him the best single drummer in the world. And here's a poster touting his abilities as a snare drum. There's the actual one over here that Mary Mott has brought in. That's a pretty rare thing. By the way, we have a display of Billy Clifford's items in the middle room there, including a top hat, his actual drumsticks, and in fact, I think these drumsticks, there you go, right there, they were black drumsticks, so we knew they were his. Here they are again. We have those sticks right here. So he was quite the drummer. Maud Huth was a successful promoter in the vaudeville arena. Billy teamed up with her to produce a very popular act. Soon the impresario Tony Pastor booked them in her various theaters. Tony Pastor pretty much invented what became known as vaudeville in the late 19th century. However, he's not to be confused with the 20th century band leader Tony Pastor, who played with Artie Shaw, then formed his own band featuring a young singer from Cincinnati he heard on WLW radio, Rosemary Clooney. That was a different Tony Pastor, but I thought I'd mention it. So what was vaudeville? It was a collection of theaters, a circuit if you will, much like some of our current movie theater chains such as AMC, Cinemark, and Regal. Tony Pastor started singing in minstrels prior to the Civil War, sang for the Union cause during the war, then opened his first theater in New York in 1865. This is one of his theaters over here. It's not a great picture, but anyway, that's what we have. By the 1880s, when Billy Clifford came along, he developed a chain of theaters that booked operettas and family-oriented variety shows. Soon he was booking first-rate entertainers such as George M. Cohan, Cohan family, Sophie Tucker, Buster Keaton, and our own Billy Clifford. Clifford and Hughes not only worked Pastor's circuit, but were booked by him in one of his own theaters, pictured here. And this is also interesting. You know, that's one of Pastor's theaters. But this is a receipt that Billy received from Tony Pastor. He apparently paid for a billboard, and Pastor gave him this receipt. So, and they were booked as Clifford and Hughes at that time. Based upon Tony Pastor's success, the number of impresarios booking vaudeville performers in wheels, as the circuits were known, grew. One of these was Gus Sun, who in 1904 headquartered his vaudeville circuit just down the road in Springfield, Ohio. That's Gus on the left. At the height of vaudeville's popularity, he was operating from his own Springfield theater. The Regent was booking nearly 1,000 acts weekly into nearly 300 houses from coast to coast. Multiple wheels, which meant approximately 2 years of steady work, even with the split week, which Sun started and popularized, whereas you would work half a week one place and half a week in another place. However, unlike Tony Pastor's circuits, Sun's was considered third-rate in that he primarily booked entry-level performers. In so doing, he reserved the right to fire performers after just one show. That said, and you might remember, maybe you've seen imitations of vaudeville hacks where they had this huge hook that was big, maybe 20 foot long with a bend on the end. They'd slip that around and jerk the guy off the stage, and that was the end of that act. However, unlike Pastor's circuit, yes, as I said, he booked only entry-level performers. That said, some of those who entered vaudeville via Gus Sun went on to do pretty well. Those included, among others, Bob Hope in the middle, Mae West on the right, the Marx Brothers, Eddie Cantor, W.C. Fields, Will Rogers, most of whom actually performed in Springfield. But back to Clifford and Hughes, who were superstars at least 3 years before Hope and Cantor were even born. Based upon their phenomenal success in the United States, the duo toured Europe, drawing thousands of fans in England, France, and Germany. Regardless of language differences, Billy's pleasing tenor voice, his drum routines, and his talent as an actor and comedian, coupled with the talents of Maude Hughes, delighted audiences far and wide. Reportedly, Clifford and Hughes commanded the largest salaries ever paid American entertainers in Europe up to that time. Once he returned to the U.S. on July 28, 1891 in Buffalo, New York, Billy and Maude were married. One of Billy's Urbana friends later implied that Billy had children with Maude, but if so, their names have not been found. Pictured are posters promoting Clifford and Hughes about 1899. Of course, the glamour of show business is offset by the hard work of rehearsing routines, writing new ones, and constantly moving, or there may have been other issues. For one thing, Maude Hughes was a believer in spiritualism, claimed to receive visits from her departed first husband, Teddy Hughes. Moreover, and I don't know how well that went over, but anyway, she did that. Moreover, some said their act should have been entitled Hughes and Clifford, as she pretty much wanted to run the show. In any case, their marriage ended in divorce, and Maude announced that she intended to marry Sam Ryan, who unhappily was Billy's best friend. A few years later, a columnist for the San Francisco Examiner took it upon himself to declare that Clifford was not exactly forlorn as a result of the divorce. He wrote, and I quote from the clipping pictured if you can't read it, "Billy became happy as a little lark singing anthems in the trees of a soft spring morning. He turned capricious. His joyousness knew no restraint. He was so tickled at the turn of affairs that he wanted to let you and me and the whole world know that no longer was he married. He embarked on a vaudeville tour all by himself. And then, lest there should be any doubt that he was free as air, he incorporated his newly found happiness in his name. He billed himself as Billy Single Clifford and had it so put on the programs. He was taking not the slightest chance of a misunderstanding." So there we have at least one interpretation of his reinvention as Billy Single Clifford, and there are others. The columnist ends his piece suggesting that Clifford went on to marry a Maud Lambert in 1906, but of that we have no record. During his many travels, Billy Clifford continued to consider Urbana his home and returned often to visit family and friends, his father having died in 1894. This family photo was taken about 1898, featuring his mother, center, right there, Billy on her right, and Levi on her left. And then Clyde's up here. Sometimes he brought other performers with him in order to work out new routines while catching up at home. Author Melanie Shipley reported that about 1903, Billy Clifford walked into Urbana's Old Brunswick Hotel on North Main Street and said to the habitués, "Boys, know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a theater, and I mean a real theater in my mother's backyard." In March 1904, he announced in interviews with the Champaign Democrat and the Urbana Daily Times Citizen that he intended to fulfill his lifelong dream of building a grand theater in his mother's backyard where the barn used to stand. He purchased the lot on South Main Street immediately behind his parents' Water Street home, hired an architect named Mills of Columbus to design it. The theater was to be located on the ground floor of a 3-story building with plenty of means of escape in case of fire. It was to be a modern in every respect with an 80-foot stage with a 65-foot gridiron, which is what they call the stage height. 65 feet, 80 feet across. And seats for some 700 patrons, which, interestingly, is I think about where the current version of the Gloria is. Is that right, Dave? No. How many seats are there?
About 400.
400, okay. But they're nicely spaced, I would say. Anyway, the 700 exceeded dimensions of major urban theaters in both categories. The addition of the balcony in 1907 increased the total seating capacity to 1,250. The building required 500,000 bricks, cost approximately $75,000, $2 million today, and was fitted with both gas and electric lighting. Finally, the theater had 8 well-lighted and ventilated dressing rooms connected to running water. By that time, his brothers Eddie, also known as Clyde, that would be Clyde, Eddie on the left, and Levi were also in show business, so Billy engaged Eddie to manage his new theater, which opened to the public on Tuesday evening, October 18th, 1904. This is a picture obviously taken later that you can see by the car there. For the next few years, Billy Clifford, at the height of his career, collaborated with several different vaudeville and musical production companies. His various theatrical stills are indications of the wide breadth of his characterizations. In his heyday, he popularized tap dancing. It was well known for his top hat, white spats, and cane. The one on the lower right includes the Escher sisters. There they are. That's an interesting photograph, I think, because in those days, before high-speed shutters and modern flashing equipment of cameras, you had to hold a pose for a while without moving to blur the picture. And look at that pose. You know, how'd you like to hold that for about 30 seconds? I don't know. Also in 1904, building upon his mounting success, Billy Clifford started his own production company, and as with all things, he did it with verve. He carried 27 people in his troupe, including what may have been the first all-girl orchestra, which is on the right, first all-girl orchestra, and this is also his troupe over here. He traveled in his own private rail cars, one for scenery and baggage, another for the performers, and of course his private car, seen here parked along the Big Four station on Miami Street. The building on the left, that building there, was once a broom factory and then a hotel. In fact, Urbana was the center of the broom manufacturing business in this country for years. There were several broom factories. That's one of them. And that was converted to a hotel. Sadly, we cannot look at photos of the interior of Mitty. That's the name of it. Possibly named or nicknamed for his second or third wife, the daughter of George Middleton of Chicago, who operated a chain of museums, actually sideshows all over the country. Again, he may have had children by Mrs. Middleton Clifford, possibly a son. No record has been found. That marriage did not last long. This is when he really hit the big time. By 1906, he was domiciled in a mansion on the famed Michigan Avenue in Chicago. Here he's pictured with his new 1906 Cadillac and driver. During those days, the Clifford Theater thrived, as exhibited by these programs overlaid beginning with 1906, then 1907, 1908, and finally 1910. Note at the top that Billy's title progresses from proprietor to manager to owner. There is proprietor, manager, I can't find that one right now, but he's owner at some point. Near the top, his brother Eddie's title as resident manager doesn't progress to manager until 1910. So Eddie was helping him sort of co-manage the theater at that point. Next is an actual ticket for a photo play, suggesting that this was in the very early days of motion pictures. Tickets were often priced at 10 cents in those days. Of course, 1927, everything changed when the first talkies came in. In 1911, this is the interior of a 1910 program, lower right. Check that out. What it says is, it's a warning against imitating or reproducing the patented motorboat race effect used in the program. It would be illegal if you try to copy it. That should be interesting to have heard. In 1911, songsters Kendis, Paley, and Goodwin wrote Billy, dedicated to their friend Billy Single Clifford. Mary Mott has the actual copy of that sheet music. which is right there. In fact, I believe it was sung at an event when the historical marker was dedicated. It's actually sung on that day. The Branstetter family is, of course, well represented in our museum, and that Martha and Jean Branstetter have their own exhibits. And now we have Jean's father, Garnet, connected with Billy Clifford. And Ray Branstetter is here with us today. Garnet would be his grandfather. His grandson, Ray, as I say, is with us. Like Billy, Garnet was a snare drummer, pictured here with a later version of the all-girl orchestra. That's Garnet right there. Now, anyway, the all-girl orchestra is now known as the Merry Minstrel Maids. This is about 1916. He had left the Clifford Show in Jacksonville, Florida in February to return to Urbana to attend to his father, Charles Branstetter, who was seriously ill. In April, the entire troupe returned to the Clifford for a production of Walk This Way, during which Garnet Branstetter appeared in his old part, possibly acting as well as playing. Mike Melvin reports that in his later days, Garnet worked at Perpetual Federal Savings Bank, and said that when he was playing with the all-girl band, he sometimes wore a wig.
Smoked a cigar.
Smoked a cigar in the...
Smoked a cigar as he was dressed as a woman playing.
No. Wish I had a picture of that. This is a promo photo for a Clifford production provided by Mrs. Fred Nye. In it, is this Walk That Way with Garnet Branstetter? I don't know. We don't know that, but it's a similar play. Note that the snare drum on the right with black drumsticks, like we have here in our Billy Clifford collection, maybe the same ones. Moving pictures had been shown at the Clifford when live acts were not scheduled as early as 1905. By 1917, movie quality was improving, while live theater, at least at the local level, was beginning to decline. Some sections of the theater were even rented out to other entities, including the Ohio National Guard, Company D, 3rd Regiment, the Red Cross, an automotive parts store and garage, possibly the Gaumer Publishing Company, which ended up across the street. Note that the title of this photo is Clifford Theater and Armory. Exact date unknown. By the way, on the right, that's the Grace Methodist Church. I'll continue with the narrative here. The Armory was on the 3rd floor, we think. The Grace Methodist Church is on the right, where the post office now stands. However, the Clifford was often used for public events, including in 1917, the recruitment of young men to fight in World War I. That same year, Billy decided to retire from the road and move back to Urbana to take over management of his theater.
Dan,
Yes.
if you go back,
Yes, sir.
the portion of the building with the awning, we've seen a floor plan where that was the printing shop. So that may have been the Gaumer, was in that northeast corner on the 1st floor.
Right there?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be a good place for a print shop. It's right on the
I
first
didn't know if it
floor.
was for his poster or whether it was, maybe like you said, the Gaumer company.
Yeah. Well, and notice here there's an entrance, which obviously you can drive the vehicle into. So I wonder if there was a ramp going down or up, or who knows? Okay. Unhappily for Billy, he had no sooner moved back to Urbana than in May of 1918, the Dream Theater caught fire, gutted most of the building's interior. An investigation suggested that an overheated motor used to operate the big Wurlitzer theater organ caused the fire, although there were rumors of sabotage. Billy lost much of his personal memorabilia in the fire, but he pushed on, borrowed money, and both rebuilt and remodeled his theater. In the meantime, in order to maintain revenue, on August 24th, 1918, Billy Clifford purchased the Ideal Theater located at 128 North Main, the southwest corner of Corton, Maine, from the city's sisters, Mrs. Minnie Ely and Miss Kitty Smith. 6 nights and 2 afternoons a week they operated the Ideal in addition to the Clifford. Now, we don't know exactly where the theater was. This is 128. The theater was not on the ground floor. In fact, there was, what was that word, a dress shop, I believe, on the ground floor. Next to it at 124, over here quite this way, was the original, we think the original Kroger. Cheryl's mother remembers going to a Kroger there. Then there's a closed doorway that goes upstairs. The second floor is pretty much partitioned off. We think that you go all the way up these stairs to get to the 3rd floor. That's where the theater was. In those days, you know, if you couldn't walk up 3 flights of stairs, too bad. I mean, that's the way it was, no elevator. But they did a pretty good business, and since the Clifford had burned, they needed a source of regular income. So they went back and forth running that theater for several years. On August 28th, same year, 1918, in Indianapolis, Indiana, he married May Collins, who was 23 years his junior. She was described as a cute little redhead in one of his touring companies. Formerly, she had appeared on the same bill with George Jessel, some of us may remember him, in a New York theater owned by Cyrus Edwards, composer of the little song School Days. Anybody remember that one? Yeah. Golden Rule Days. They came to live in Urbana around the corner from his widowed mother in a 2-story house with a slate roof, 3 bedrooms, 2 porches, 229 South Walnut Street, shown as it appears today. Are the occupants of that house here? No? Anyway, it's nicely kept, and there it is. It must have seemed like a mansion to May after living out of hotel rooms as a showgirl. An added benefit was that Billy could be close to his mother and look after her as she lived alone. Sarah had always been proud of Billy and the accomplishments of his brothers as well. There's Mother Sarah, Levi, Billy, Clyde. 1923, May gave birth to their daughter, Dorothy, who was raised in the South Walnut Street house. Managing the Clifford Theater, booking both live productions and by 1927, the newer talking movies, kept both Billy and May busy in addition to running the Ideal Theater. Billy dabbled in politics. He ran for mayor of Urbana twice, helped others campaign for various offices. At one point he applied for and was appointed a state farm marshal, and there's his application applying for that job as fire marshal, which he was appointed to. In 1924, the Oddfellows building, located at 111 and 113 South Main Street, was sold to new owners who remodeled it and renamed it the Endowment Building. That's how we know it today. Though the Urbana Post Office had been located there for years in the Endowment Building, probably for decades, their leasehold was found to be unsatisfactory to new ownership, resulting in their need to relocate. Billy Clifford stepped up, built an addition to his theater, then known as the Clifford Building. That addition was completed on Saturday, February 25th, and the post office was open for business the following Monday. So it was the post office that served as the Urbana Post Office for 12 years. That would be from 1924, until 1934, when the current post office, just to the north, over here, was opened. The same year, Prohibition was repealed, and the former post office, seen here, became a liquor store. Some of us remember this extension of the theater when it was a hat shop. Anybody, and who ran the hat shop?
Bob McCarthy.
Who?
Bob McCarthy.
Yeah, Bob McCarthy's was up by McLaughlin's, wasn't it, or was this his?
No, he was there, but he wasn't the original owner. It might have been Elizabeth Drive.
Okay. I was thinking it might have been somebody named Powell. That ring a bell? No? Anyway, that was a hat shop. That's where the hats were, plainly visible. In 1928, Billy talked May into moving over to the house on West Water so that he could attend to his mother. They spent $3,000 to renovate the east part of the house to make it more comfortable for their family and make it easier to look after his mother who lived on the other side. This may not be that location. It was also at this time they tore down the old relocated Methodist parsonage that had been originally built on the theater lot as it had become an eyesore. So we're not sure, are we, Mary, that this was?
No,
Not real sure. This could be back to 229 Walnut Street. Anyway, there are names written on the back of this one. They're named and numbered and everything, so it's pretty handy. See if we can point out. There are a lot of Gladdens here. I don't know if anybody remembers Bill Gladden, if he might have been related to him. Number 4 is Clyde. There he is. And of course, Billy's there. We have a number of cousins. Let's see. Dorothy, the daughter, right there. Okay. July 13th, 1929, they gathered for this. They were celebrating Sarah Gladden Shire's 90th birthday. Okay. On the morning of November 20th, 1930, Billy Single Clifford Shirey walked uptown to make a few purchases. According to witness accounts related in his obituary, he stopped at a meat store and while being waited on, went through a little tap dance to show that he was still in step. There it is. That goes way back to, of course, Marty and Lynn Rich owned that building. George Ray had a meat market before that, and obviously it was a butcher shop or meat market when Billy went in there. Upon returning home to 114 West Water Street, his wife May heard a noise, found him slumped over in the bathroom. Dr. D.C. Hauser was called, but it was too late. Billy Single Clifford had taken his final bow. He died of a stroke, referred to then as apoplexy, at the age of 61, leaving his mother, Sarah Elizabeth Gladden Shirey, 92, his wife May, 45, daughter Dorothy, 7, brothers Levi Clarence and Edward Clyde Shirey, half-sister Eva St. Clair, Charlotte. If other children existed and survived, they remain unknown. Telegraph wires carried the news of his death from Herald Square to theater districts nationally and internationally. The writer of his obituary recounted his early childhood performances and said that from this humble start, the very bottom rung of the ladder, he steadfastly climbed to the very top of his chosen profession when his name was a byword on Broadway. He's buried at Oakdale. Mary Maud has seen to it that his monument has been well maintained. It's very nice. As you drive into the main entrance at Oakdale, you turn to the right, it's immediately on your left. Of course, Billy Clifford died at the beginning of the Great Depression. Times were tough to say the least. Daughter Dorothy worked as a sales girl in local dress shops during her school years. Billy had left the West Water Street home to his widow May, but in 1936, she decided to put the house up for rent and move with her daughter Dorothy to California, seeking employment. She married Joseph Nemechek in 1937, and according to her letters, lived with him in good style in Laguna Hills, California, the rest of their lives. Tragically, in 1964, Billy and May's daughter Dorothy died in an auto accident. The Clifford Theater also suffered during the Depression. Though only $9,000 remained on the mortgage from the 1918 rebuilding, the surviving Shirey brothers could not make the payments, and the Urbana Home Loan Company threatened to foreclose. In the meantime, a primary supporting beam in the center of the theater had collapsed. At some point during the 1930s, Grant Woolley, who had owned the smaller Lyric Theater, purchased the theater for $47,000. In September of 1940, Warren G. Grimes purchased the building, cleaned out the decayed portions of the interior, and totally remodeled it to include some Art Deco features and a private gallery or private balcony booth for his family, one of whom was his daughter Gloria, after whom he renamed the former Clifford. The Gloria opened on Christmas Day, 1941. Interesting. Some may think that was an odd time to open a theater and that Pearl Harbor had been attacked only a few days before. But Grimes and FDR both knew that entertainment would be an important morale booster throughout the dark days of war. Moreover, theaters were a source of news, as newsreels frequently preceded feature motion pictures. In 1966, the Chakers family of Springfield acquired the Gloria, split it into two, and renamed it Urbana Twin Cinemas. They screened first-run movies at first, but as Cineplexes opened nearby, it became difficult for them to compete, so they ran second-run pictures at discounted prices. In 2014, the Urbana Methodist Church purchased the building, formed the Grand Works Foundation, a community-based nonprofit tasked with rebuilding the theater and transforming it into a platform for community productions, both live and digitally projected. In the years since, the Gloria Theater has been returned to a single-screen stage operation with approximately 400 comfortable seats. Its third and final phase of refurbishment will include an eatery, the Clifford Cafe, right there, located just to the right upon entering the theater. Note the expansive exterior walls, now barren. Would they not make an excellent canvas for murals depicting Billy Clifford when he entertained there? Just a suggestion. Finally, on a bright sunny day on July 2010, an Ohio historical marker dedicated to Billy Clifford was then unveiled for all to see. On the left is a photo from the front page of the Urbana Daily Citizen dated July 26, 2010. At the direction of Mary Mott, the ceremony was held in the nearby Carey Auditorium that included music and reenactments. And that's the program, Billy Clifford. Thanks a lot. Any questions or comments? A couple times.
Not recently. We've done at least one, but they've done more than that as they keep moving